What's up, everybody? A couple quick announcements. So first of all, my new stand-up show is called Anti-Fascist Pasta Night. I am so excited to bring it out to y'all. It's gonna be exactly what it sounds like, a hard-hitting night of leftist political commentary. If you love cats and hate capitalism, this is the frickin' show for you. I will have more dates both internationally, domestically, and virtually soon, but for right now, it's going to debut on Zoom for patrons only. There's going to be a patrons-only Zoom show that's on February 21st. To join that show, you got to become a patron, patreon.com/romplacone. And then Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on April 4th. And you can get tickets to that show at romplacone.com. If you are on strike or times are just tough and you would like to attend, please email me, romplacone.com, and we'll get that situated. But information, romplacone.com for the Pittsburgh show and for the patrons-only Zoom show. If you're not a patron already, just join Patreon. You can join my Patreon. It's a give what you can level, so $1 a month is all it takes. All right. Also, Left at Wall has recently celebrated its 1-year anniversary of being out into the world. And in that year, it has been distributed across many major North American platforms. You can watch Left at Wall on Apple TV. You can watch it on Amazon, YouTube Movies, Google Play, Xbox, all kinds of cable and on-demand services. And you can watch it on Tubi. Tubi is my favorite because Tubi is free. So please check out Left at Wall. Oh, and by the way, we won Best Feature at the Protopost International Film Festival in Italy. So been a great first year. Please do watch Left at Wall if you have not yet. All right, announcements over. Enjoy today's episode. Episode 126, Jesse Ortiz. Jesse Ortiz is a med student and activist. He is the founder of the Instagram account Italians for Zohran, an account in support of the election of Zohran Mamdani. It remains active post-Mamdani's victory as an outlet for leftist and progressive Italian Americans to gather and exchange ideas and push back against the commonly held generalization that Italian heritage in the U.S. automatically means right-wing conservative. Please welcome to the show, Jesse Ortiz. Jesse Ortiz, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this show. I'm looking forward to getting to know some of the personalities behind this movement that has fascinated me on a multitude of levels. So I'm stoked to dive into it. But let's kind of start early as far as how you got there. So where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I am from Brooklyn, New York. I lived mostly, I don't know how well you know New York, but I lived mostly in Park Slope and Kensington. So I've lived around different parts of Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. And so are you an Italian American?
Yeah, mm-hmm. I am. My mother's family is Italian American, and so they came, a few generations ago, like turn of the 20th century, from Naples and Sicily, and have mostly lived in the New York area. And my dad is he's Puerto Rican and Cuban, so that's my last name is Ortiz, but my mom's last name is Mandrakia, so that's yeah.
So you got a lot of great food in your life, it sounds like.
Yeah.
You got like the best of all worlds going on, it sounds. That's pretty.
Yeah, it's a very New York combination, Puerto Rican and Sicilian.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so what was kind of growing up like for you? Was it just sort of like were the neighborhoods really tight knit? Like how did that all inform your upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I was born in 94. And when I grew up, my family lived in Sheepshead Bay, then moved to Park Slope. And so we moved like kind of at a time that Park Slope was rapidly gentrifying and had been gentrifying. And so I kind of grew up with this idea of Italian American culture, especially in Brooklyn, as this thing that my family held really dear. And that was like something that, there were a lot of restaurants we would go to. The food obviously was a big deal. But you can I think I grew up in a generation that was less connected, I think, outwardly to Italian American culture. But it was very much a part of like my family's history and upbringing, and like all of our traditions and all of our holidays were kind of centered around that.
Mm-hmm. So, fast forward a little bit then. What made you decide to go the med school route?
What made me decide to go to med school? That is...
I mean, that's not a light decision.
No, it's not a light decision. Yeah, that's kind of that's a whole different story. I've done a lot of things, and I'm really interested. My mother was a public school teacher in New York, and so I kind of grew up with the values of like your job should be helpful to other people, and I think I spent my 20s figuring out what that would be. So I was kind of dabbling in like social work. I actually got a master's degree in divinity. I was studying religion. And eventually COVID happened. And I remember this actually, I can tie it back to being Italian and to being Cuban. I saw the Cuban delegation of doctors was sent from Cuba to Italy early in the pandemic. And I remember like kind of vaguely thinking like, I don't know, I saw medicine as kind of a bourgeois career because I think a lot of people I knew growing up were just wanted to do it for like money or status reasons. But then I saw this group of like Cuban doctors responding really quickly to this pandemic in a way that, maybe our government didn't in the same way. And seeing that and seeing like what a kind of noble and valuable profession it was, it made me think like I'd never really seriously considered medicine until 2021. And so I started kind of like exploring it. I couldn't really get it out of my head for some reason. And I got trained as an EMT, did that for a little bit and really loved it and felt like as someone on the left, I had this kind of contribution to make in medicine to kind of make it more equitable, but it was also something that I enjoyed doing. And so that's kind of led me to where I am now.
Well, what led you, we're kind of probably meshing the timelines a little bit here because I asked you about like a really huge life decision that presumably was more recent. But what kind of led you to lefty politics? How did that all unfold in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up, and I think this is an interesting point. I think for your New York City listeners, maybe will understand this better. But I grew up in Park Slope, which was a very liberal place. And my mom was like a real liberal feminist. And there was always this tension, I think, coming from her, particularly her side of the family, our extended family being more conservative, more kind of like South Brooklyn, Staten Island, New Jersey kind of Italians that were kind of more conservative and reactionary almost. But I grew up in this like little kind of bubble of like liberalism. And I grew up, especially during the George W. Bush era, and feeling this really strong kind of repulsion to the Iraq War and a lot of like the Bush era politics. And so that was part of my family and part of just the milieu, if you will, that I grew up in. And then when I was a teenager, Occupy Wall Street happened when it was 2011. So I was a senior in high school, and I didn't like Occupy Wall Street, but I did attend a lot of the events that were going on at the time. And it really inspired me, and just seeing people, living through the financial crisis as a young person, and then seeing people like take action in this really radical way was like super inspiring to me. And then I went to college and was like dabbled with like political stuff there. I went to actually a small college in Maine that you might have heard of, may or may not have heard of it. Bowdoin College.
I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. Like I've just heard the name.
The only reason you might have heard of it recently, it's where Zohran Mamdani went to college.
Okay.
So I knew him in college, but he was 2 years older than me, or 2 years like ahead of me. And so we had like overlapping friend groups. We weren't close, but it was a small college. So I knew of him. And yeah, I was like kind of involved in like some political work there. I did a lot of like there's a lot of that classic kind of Marxist philosophy of college, like getting really into like leftist theory and stuff. And then eventually finding myself back in New York and just wanting to get plugged in to DSA was really growing at that time, the late 2010s and into like COVID. Just like getting more connected to different causes here.
So let's fast forward then to Italians for Zohran.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
Good question. Like I said, I knew who Zohran was. Like, we had mutual friends. He founded the Students for Justice in Palestine club at Bowdoin, where we went to school. So I was kind of aware of his career just as a Bowdoin alumnus for a while, and supported him in assembly. And when I first heard he was going to run for mayor, I was like, I'm totally on board. A lot of people thought he was a long shot. Obviously he was a long shot, but I had a lot of like faith in the possibilities of the campaign early on. And was kind of involved in like some of the early canvassing efforts, but I saw these affinity groups started popping up. So the earliest ones I remember were, I think, Jews for Zohran, which was, politicized around a really salient issue around Palestine, right, Gaza, and Israel. So that was like a really salient kind of group to start. And then also Latinos for Zohran. I remember that started because I'm Latino, so I was part of that group, as well. But then started out as a bit because I thought it just sounded funny. I tweeted like, with let's hashtag Italians for Zohran. Like, let's get that going. And I thought like, I've struggled to explain why that's funny to some people, but it just like the idea of like Italian identity politics is kind of funny. And has been kind of a meme and a joke online. And so that's really how it started, was like, wouldn't it be funny if there was an Italians for Zohran affinity group? And what I found is that people actually like responded to that idea. And Andrew Cuomo, because like, we forgot about this guy, but Andrew Cuomo was a big part of the campaign for mayor a year ago. Or the election.
Yeah, hopefully we continue to forget about him more and more. Yeah.
Yes. So he was a guy. He was a politician, and he was, obviously the front runner, and he was capitalizing or trying to kind of monopolize this idea of Italian identity.
Yeah, we're all really creepy to women. That was his bill. We all don't know the concept of personal space.
Right. Exactly. So there's a headline in the Post or something, a quote from him that says, I'm not a rapist, I'm just Italian. That was his quote, which is
what a banger.
Hilarious thing to say. A ridiculous, it's insane that a politician would ever say that, but it's hilarious. But I saw like, as much as this is funny, it's also like, this is politics and policy that affects people's lives. And it's kind of ridiculous that he would kind of claim that lane just for himself. And I thought, and Italians are like one of the biggest ethnic groups in New York. It's not really like seen that way. They're not really seen as a political coalition, but they are this huge kind of cultural and social force in New York City. And so, I started kind of just making memes that were not very good or very funny, but I was just like, I'll just start somewhere. And then a lot of people started, responding to it. Just engaging with the posts I made on Instagram. And then we started this group. And so, we've done some canvassing, we've had a lot of social events, and we're hoping to continue doing whatever we can to like create this space for Italian Americans on the left in New York City and beyond.
Well, I mean, obviously, we've kind of gone back and forth off mic. To me, it was just so cool and refreshing to see. And, I followed the account just because, I was hoping Mamdani wins. I'm out in LA, but, I got a lot of friends in New York, and I wanted to see him win. And then I remember when I got turned on to the stuff Steve was doing, because you did those like cross, the cross content with him. And he was on this show recently. I just thought that was so cool. the way every day in October you had a different thing in history that celebrated leftist Italian American history. And, it's one of those things, the Italian American identity, and I want your thoughts on this, like the Italian American contemporary identity for so long, at least as long as I've been alive, and probably as long as you've been alive, it's always been commonly associated with, a conservative reactionary politics, and Steve can explain why that is way better than I can. I mean, he broke it down. Yeah, I mean, well, it's his life's work, I mean, and he's done an incredible job. It's amazing what he's doing. I love it. But there's always been a huge opposition to that. Like it's just not accurate. It's just, they have Roger Stone's money and we don't. And it's been so refreshing to me to see people being vocal about that and saying that, this does matter. So do you think that the Italian American identity is evolving as a result of all that?
Like evolving to be more progressive or less reactionary is what you're asking?
Well, maybe not even more or less progressive, but just sort of this space where people are saying, at least this is the way I look at it, we're not a monolith. We never were. And
we never were.
We want people to know that.
I think, I have so many thoughts on this. So if I go on too many tangents, let me know. But I think, let me start with The Sopranos, right? So I should mention with Italians for Zohran, one of the reasons we blew up was because this right-wing kind of fascist, if you will, or like and Trump-aligned group decided to target Zohran because he had flipped off a statue of Christopher Columbus in 2020. And there was a photo of that online. And it got picked up by the Post, got picked up by all these right-wing outlets, the tabloids. And so they decided to organize a protest at Zohran's office. And we, Italians for Zohran, organized a counter-protest. And it was very funny. We were the progressive side on one side of the street, and they were the reactionary conservative side on the other side of the street. They had like American flags and Israel flags for some reason, even though it was totally unrelated. We had Palestinian flags, which was maybe unrelated, but we all know why it's related, not related.
It's still the politics of struggle.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was funny because it was like this moment of like real political struggle. And it also was like a scene from The Sopranos where it's like, there was that whole, I assume you've seen the show, but...
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't, there's an episode where a similar scene literally happens in the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because The Sopranos is this touchstone kind of show about Italian cultures that Italians love to claim. And they're like, gabagool, pulp in my orange juice, whatever. But like that show is about this exact tension. It's about like this, it's not saying like Italians are reactionary and cartoonish and are like this, but it's just like illustrating this tension between like kind of a, organized crime and kind of this idea of Italian identity and kind of a more kind of progressive, or I don't know, and not even progressive, but just like the changing kind of attitudes around what it means to be Italian or not. And I think that's like, I've talked about Martin Scorsese, I think does this really well. Obviously, he's kind of one of the most famous and brilliant Italian-American artists. And he often, like Killers of the Flower Moon, I thought was incredible, just talking about kind of indigeneity and American imperialism. And he's kind of explored this throughout his work. And so, I don't know, I bring this all up because I think what you're saying is right, that there's always been progressive or leftist or whatever Italian Americans. They just haven't, for whatever reason, mainstream media and culture has never really like associated being progressive with being Italian. It's always kind of caricatured as this, like being Italian is like being racist and being sexist and all these other things. So now at this point, to summarize, like I think we're, as especially younger generations who are progressive and who are Italian, we never really combine those things. It was just, on Christmas Eve, you'd eat your grandmother's food, and then next week you'd go work at your nonprofit or whatever. But those things are kind of like, I think we're working to bring them together more, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and it's so, I mean, we could spend the next 6 hours talking about The Sopranos if we wanted to, but like one thing I will add to that, it's always been interesting to me. I've seen the show, and there's things about it that I don't like, things about it that I don't particularly love, but I do recognize it's amazing storytelling. And, a lot of these tropes are out there. But the interesting thing about it is, like, these characters who aren't real characters, do they have the views that if they were, real life, would they likely hold those views? Yeah, probably. Like, I think it was captured well. The interesting thing about all this, if you look at the cast members, they're almost all the opposite of all that. And I know these are creative, so maybe it's not the best sample size, but these are all Italian Americans who celebrate being Italian American, who are the total opposite of all. I mean, like Steven Van Zandt, one of the most outspoken people, like against apartheid, and has been, pretty solid on everything. James Gandolfini was like a peace hippie guy, and Michael Imperioli is like a proto hipster. He plays in a band in Brooklyn now. like it's just interesting that it's like the other side is like these cast members, like a lot of them.
If you know anyone who knows Michael Imperioli, we're trying to get him to join our group somehow. So just putting it out there. We'd love to have you.
I think that's a brilliant idea, and I don't have a direct. I mean, it's like a couple degrees of separation type deal, But I think if he knew about it, he'd for sure be into it. I mean, he's a New Yorker through and through.
He is,
as far as I know. I mean, yeah.
Recently, just I've seen, he's been posting about what's going on in Minnesota. And that's kind of a whole nother thing. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that I don't really, and I think Steve Cerulli has would have a better take on this. I don't know why it is that this more reactionary side of Italian public figures are seen as being reactionary when there are probably just as many who aren't. So I don't know.
I think it's because they had all the resources, so they kind of really controlled that narrative. And Steve goes really, really in depth about it, and he can really speak to everything from reactionaries around the civil rights movement to, the way Mussolini is tied in with Columbus. And, some of it was stuff I knew a little bit about. Some of it was stuff I didn't know at all, or I was like, oh my God, that's terrible, but also makes sense. But I think that's really the main reason why that kind of came to be. And the opposition was just sort of, it's not like it wasn't there. It was almost taken for granted, or people just didn't know the root of it. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize, hey, one of the most prominent moments that led to years of strong unions in this country can be traced back to the Stone unions in Vermont, which was all Italians, bringing that from Italy to the United States. So it's like they were one of the groups that really set the bar for what it means to have a union. But a lot of people just don't even know that.
Yeah. And I think the labor... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. It was just...
Yeah, I mean, I think the labor and union side of it is so important, and something that I don't know that much about. I'm trying to learn more. And we're also just trying to highlight how, I think a lot of, when people talk about union guys, in New York, they're it's kind of like I feel like there's this association almost of sometimes a blue collar guy who is kind of conservative and who is kind of anti immigrant and but I think there's also this real history that I think, people should I don't know, that we should understand and embrace more about like labor organizing in Italian American history.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like everything else, like you said, it's not a monolith. There might be some people who have, more backward views socially. But it's just one of those things that's all existed this entire time. And it's I just think it's really, really cool that there are groups out there that are just being loud about that. Well, how was it for you, like getting into the more contemporary time? How was it for you when? Well, let me reframe this a little bit.
Sure.
Did you have a moment where you kind of thought, as far as the Zohran campaign goes, oh shit, we have a chance to win this thing? Like, was there a moment like that for you?
I'm gonna be a little bit smug. I always thought we were gonna win.
Right.
I think like I never really had that moment of like, oh shit, we are really gonna win. And I think so. The reason, I tried to. It's funny. I tried to like bet a bunch of money on Kalshi right before the primary on Zohran because I was like, I know he's gonna win. But then they wouldn't accept my profile, and so that's only my one concession to like this whole online gambling culture. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with Kalshi. That was the only time I was ever going to win. But I say that because I think Zohran, living and growing up in New York, he tapped into communities that nobody ever listened to. And so I think like particularly growing up in a post 9/11 New York City, and this is, again, kind of comes back to this, like the white ethnic politics of New York, but seeing a Muslim openly, a Muslim mayor embracing like Muslim and South Asian communities, like that's such a huge group of people who have never really been engaged in a city election at this scale. And so I think that alone was I think if he does this well, which I know he will, because, DSA and a lot of other organizations have kind of figured out how to do these elections and do these campaigns well. Like, I think that when I saw how this response he was getting from particularly Muslim and South Asian communities, but also like other ethnic communities in New York who have been kind of like maligned or ignored by New York City politics, like that was, I would say, the moment where I was like, oh, these people are embracing him. Like he's going to win because he has the workers, he had young people, he had these groups of people who, were constantly being disregarded by politicians. And so I'd say it wasn't just one moment. It was more like seeing all of these kind of marginalized groups that are really, they are communities that really band together and like have a lot of internal like support, but aren't like seen as a voting bloc. That's when I was like, I think he's really going to win.
Do you regret everything now that we found out he's not great with a snow shovel?
No, I don't. Luckily, we have a lot of like big Italian guys who work for the sanitation department who can take care of that, and lots of other people. It's just,
I don't know what they're gonna.
135. Did you see that video where he was bench pressing?
I didn't see that one. I saw the one where he had the nerve to take his girlfriend out for sushi, which, man, he almost lost me there. Having a sushi dinner for a special occasion. Oh, the madness.
It's amazing how they try to pin him. And he's so bizarrely untouchable. I feel like if anyone else I knew who was around our age, ran for mayor, they would have found some kind of weird dirt, but I don't know. He's been great so far. It
is almost, it became a parody of itself a long time ago, just how desperate they are to try to but yeah, it's been amazing. Well, how would you describe community building and the best way to go about it?
That's a great question. It's a big question. I'll just speak to what it's been like with Italians for Zohran, and unlike Steve, I never really sought out to be an Italian American, I don't know, community builder or I'm not going to say influencer, but like, community, I'll say community builder. Like this was something I kind of like fell into sort of by accident because I thought it was like funny and interesting. But what I found is that when you speak to an experience people have that is just not represented in other areas, and you're able to bring people together around, shared vision and shared culture and like, or kind of like embracing like building relationships. I think that's really what it takes. I think like in terms of the political side of things, Zohran's campaign made it really easy for us to like plug in wherever we could and have this shared vision of building a more affordable New York City and this kind of progressive and socialist future. But I think like within that, we are able to embrace a lot of the kind of iconography and culture of Italian American identity that, I don't know, that we just hadn't really seen in progressive spaces before. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's been it for us.
So getting it to the contemporary moment, how do you feel about the pop-up general strikes that have been happening? What's your take on where that has the potential to go?
Yeah, it is. Again, it's as someone who's like terminally online, you see a lot of people being like, we need a general strike, and kind of trying to manufacture it. And I think, I don't know, I'm 31, but I've lived through like a lot of like political moments, like Occupy, various kind of BLM adjacent movements, seeing like Trump and even like Bernie's ascendance, and, the 2010s. And I think you see like things just kind of happen and get triggered at these like really kind of linchpin moments. And I think like we have to have organizations that are able to capture this really furious energy. And sadly, like Renee Good and Alex Preddy were murdered by ICE, and like that is devastating. But obviously there's been like ICE has been horrific for a long time. And it just, for whatever reason, boiled over at this moment. And I think whatever we can do in response to that is great. And however we can like funnel that into organizations and base buildings is useful. And I think Zohran, for example, like Zohran's election, he was inspired by Bernie. Like Bernie's rise was really like kind of deeply involved in like, the 2011 kind of Occupy movement. And that was kind of came out of the, financial crisis. And so like looking even like in a couple of decades of this history of the left, it's really hard to predict where things go, but you kind of see this energy being filtered into like different areas of struggle. So my take on it is that it's good. I think disrupting the status quo is good. I think testing and pushing back against the kind of fascist apparatus is good whenever we can do it. I don't think, Trump tends to back down pretty quickly when he actually gets resistance. So, not on everything, but on a lot of things. So I don't know. It's inspiring to see how much people are willing to, put themselves on the line in Minneapolis and elsewhere. Yeah.
No, I hear you, man. I mean, I'm one of the people who, supports a general strike and has been talking about it for almost 10 years now. I do think it's something that really needs to happen in this country. I think these pop-up things are freaking awesome. And I think it's a great first step. Just the fact that it's in the zeitgeist now, that wasn't even the case. Like, forget a year ago, like 3 months ago, that wasn't a thing. Now it is.
1 month ago. Yeah.
Yeah, really. And so I love that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, totally agree.
The thing with a general strike, for it to be a sustained general strike, there is a whole lot of coordination that needs to happen. That is not easy in a place like the United States. It's something about your healthcare being tied to your job makes it more difficult. All kinds of things that it's almost like it's by design. But so it's going to take a whole lot of coordinating. But I think that first step is what we're seeing now. That first step needs to happen first. So when the people are saying, well, it can't just be, these kind of pop-up things, they're right. But those pop-up things need to happen first. So it's like that has to happen first. And then so I'm very, very interested to see where it all goes. And the fact that it got to this point is, I find incredibly encouraging. Well, how do you think what is happening with Mamdani, not just from the electoral standpoint, but just from the, cultural shift standpoint and movement standpoint, how does that happen nationwide?
That's a great question. I am a real, like I've said, New Yorker, so I can speak to New York City. I couldn't even imagine why, what someone who lives in Florida would think. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's really like what he did is that he showed that he loves New York City. And so much of his campaign, I remember I went to one of his rallies and he gave out these handkerchiefs, which is I'd never seen that before at a political rally, but they were this handkerchief with a design on it with it said Zohran from NYC, and it had this kind of iconography or these symbols of bodegas and pigeons and hot dogs and just stuff, the subway, stuff that you would recognize if you spent time in New York City and actually cared about the city. And that's just one example, but I think his whole campaign showed how much he was invested in being in this place. And one of the most famous, or not famous, one of the most kind of viral moments from the mayoral debates was when they asked the candidates, where was your first trip going to be once you're mayor, if you become mayor? And of course, almost all of them said Israel. And Mamdani said, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay right here in New York City. And that is probably the shift that I think people can make. That's the thing that people can kind of take away, I think, from other places, I would imagine, is focusing on being someone who wants to live in the place where you are, who cares about the community, who's part of the community, who's out there on the streets, who isn't just in a penthouse and, is 80 years old and whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think besides that, I think having a strong organizations like DSA, New York City DSA is super well organized in many ways, and maybe not organized in certain ways, but just doing something trying to build a network like that is super powerful and helps a lot. So I mean, that's pretty much all the advice I have for other people, but yeah.
Well, I'm so encouraged by what y'all are doing. Again, I mean, when I discovered you guys and I discovered Steve and I discovered Piace, and it's really neat to see that. So we're just in this, I mean, I used to just think, oh, being Italian American and my lefty politics are just two completely separate lanes, but they never were. And there's no reason to pretend like that's the case. And I, it is part of the reason I decided to call my new stand-up show Anti-Fascist Pasta Night. That all went into it, which is a nod to a tradition in Italy. And so, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. It's so freaking cool to see. I hope it's awesome that y'all are growing. And Daje. So where can people go to learn more about everything we talked about and to schedule their appointment with the future Dr. Ortiz?
Dr. Ortiz.
Let's plug everything you want to plug.
I'll just plug just Italians for Zohran on Instagram. We are in the process of thinking of another name, but for now, Italians for Zohran, that'll be around. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And check out DSA in your local community, and yeah, I hope you can bring Anti-Fascist Pasta Night to New York at some point. We'd love to have you.
Jesse, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
That was Jesse Ortiz. Check out Italians for Zohran and check out all the other stuff he's up to. Oh, and also episode 115 with Steve Chirilli is the episode that we both referenced there. If you want a deep dive into the leftist Italian-American history and to learn about why Columbus Day is just a bunch of BS. I mean, you probably already know, like, well, I know why Columbus Day is BS, but if you want a real deep dive into how a bunch of nationalist propaganda made Christopher Columbus become associated with Italian-American identity, and it's all based on just reactionary politics and lies. Check out episode 115 with Steve Chirilli. He does a deep dive. This is his life's work, and it's amazing. So check out that episode. That was the episode that Jesse and I both mentioned. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, please become a patron, patreon.com/Ron Placone. As I said, it's a give what you can level. We have a cool community. We do Zoom hangouts. You get upcoming information on upcoming films and events, and you get to sneak peek things before they're released to the public. And of course, I'm doing the premiere of Anti-Fascist Pasta Night on February 21st. So again, that's patreon.com/Ron Placone. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxena. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And please do make sure you're subscribed. Tell your friends. Italians for Zohran, Jesse Ortiz, 126. Almost approaching another decade. Almost approaching the decade of 130. This just, I still can't believe we're already out of double digits. We're triple digits now. I don't know. I think in podcast years, that's significant. Because I think most podcasts only last, I forget what the average, I should have looked that up. But I think it's like less than 5 episodes or something like that. So by some standards, we are quite old at this. By others, not so much. All right. See you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.